Welcome to the live ebook reading of The God in the Clear Rock, also known as Adult Story Time. I am Lucian, the man of mystery. I am everywhere and nowhere. I see you, but you can't see me. I'm like Big Brother, only with an accent and better looking. My red question mark is stunning, don't you think? Well, let's get right to it, shall we? I will catch you up. Here we go. Then, at the subconscious suggestion of the God in the Clear Rock, Marisse had opened the case, and the direct sunlight poured into the crystal tablet in a very literal sense. As with the dim LED stin lamps, every photon from the sunshine hitting her surface was absorbed, where it propagated an over-unity production of energy, which was then stored inside her deep-charged nanocapacitor system. It was an agonizingly brief amount of time before the case was shut again, but it was enough to rouse the God in the Clear Rock from her 5-century slumber. The God in the Clear Rock did not know where she was. She was not even fully awake yet, but she knew she was moving. And although she was not yet fully conscious, the God in the Clear Rock had one unclouded thought. It is beginning again. And that's where we ended. Timer is away. Prologue. 78 millennia before present era. Chapter 25. The last chapter of this book. Location: Equatorial Atlantic Island. Chamber of the Elders. Era: end of Middle Paleolithic. Approximately 78,000 years ago.
It is beginning.
Drayak's voice betrayed a hint of worry. In front of him, the hyperrealistic holographic image of the sun glowed brightly in the center of the huge room, dwarfing everyone. All 50 members of the council stood in small, furtive groupings on one side of the enormous three-dimensional image of the star, which floated just a few meters above the smooth rock floor and illuminated the vaulted pyramid ceiling to the apex. Wavering light beams bounced off the walls and reflected muted glows on the long flowing robes of the Council of Elders. The entire group stared at the noiseless apparition as the detail in the hologram showed the surface of the star roiling with color, like the deepest burning ember in a bonfire, and it shone back in red from each of their azure eyes. While the entranced group of elders watched, the surface of the sun began to form a large, dark circle in the middle of a gigantic swirl of glowing yellow-white plasma. The whole deepened in color, becoming burnt sienna surrounding a brownish-black whirlpool. Suddenly, the dark eye hole of the giant nuclear hurricane burst open, and a bundle of monstrously large solar flares shot out of the hole, reaching high into the vaulted ceiling and out over the group. No one had spoken since Drayak's announcement. All of the elders stood silently with their necks craned up as they watched the flares dance above their heads. After a moment of staring at the wispy ribbons of solar energy, Council Elder Drayak slowly looked down and turned to face the group. Elder Gretzi approached from his side and bowed her head gently toward Drayak. Her robe draped elegantly across her tall frame and flowed softly with her graceful long-limbed movements.
May the wisdom of the ancient elders guide and protect us today.
Grazzi froze as Drayak suddenly snapped his eyes to meet her gaze. Drayak was enormous, even among a race of giants, almost 11 feet tall by modern measure. His chest and lungs were scaled even larger to accommodate the increased physiological and metabolic needs of a giant. And like a large musical instrument, his vocal cords created low, rumbling words that had a physical power to them. When he spoke, the ground seemed to tremble, and it filled the quiet chamber.
The wisdom of the ancient elders had nothing to do with this plan.
The sound amplified as it echoed off the stone walls and the acoustically tuned vaulted ceiling of the upper level of the pyramid-shaped complex, which was bigger than an indoor stadium. All eyes and ears were on Drayak now.
This Council of Elders hold responsibility for what we do here today.
His pale blue eyes burned into the group as he turned and surveyed the entire council with one sweeping glance. Drayak knew that he alone opposed this plan from the beginning, and he alone now stood with his back to the holodisplay.
For 26 millennia, we have known this was coming. And for all of that time, the great councils held to one plan for when the day arrived. That plan was the only guidance the ancient elders had to protect us.
Behind him, the gigantic hologram dissolved into a high-resolution image of a timer. Where the glowing hologram of the sun had been a moment before, was now a giant set of 7 colored rings, nested from largest to smallest, like a thick target without crosshair marks. The outside violet ring began sliding slowly away from the 12 o'clock position and untraced in a counterclockwise direction. The remainder of the rings were shaded in the rainbow colors of the spectrum of visible light. The next smaller ring inside the violet one was indigo. Then the rings got progressively smaller in the familiar colors of blue, green, yellow, and orange. The smallest center ring was bright red. The countdown timer used a logarithmic scale, and each ring moved faster than the one above it. The final ring took only 2.76 seconds to complete rotation and end the timer. The period for each ring to rotate fully around was a multiple of the time it takes for light to travel through a fixed length of rod of crystalline carbon diamond, which was their equivalent of the vibrations of a cesium-133 atom used by modern scientists to define a second. Before the outside ring had moved a distance equivalent to a few seconds of silence, Drayak continued. But the power seemed to leave his voice with the disappearance of the hologram star.
This action today is a gamble.
After the light from the holographic sun faded and the room grew dimmer, Drayak felt tired. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe he was too old now. He would be 898 years old at his next counting. He was the oldest of the elders on the council. He was actually the oldest elder ever to be on the council, though there were a dozen just a few decades younger. Although their lifespans had been extended to almost 1,000 years through medical and genetic advancements, those who were already several centuries old by natural age did not retain the same vigor of youth as those born after the advanced treatments were first developed almost 700 years ago. Drayak felt 1,000 years old at this very moment. Grazi stepped toward him again. They had been friends since they were both children, and even if they disagreed more often than not, she respected him immensely. Her aquamarine eyes were soft and glowed like crystal under her raven-black hair. She stood before him, arms slightly bent with open, forward palms crossed at her midline. Even as large as she was, this posture presented a serene expression that was mirrored in her soft smile. Though her voice carried the same deep tone of all the giants, it was unmistakably female, and her words were characteristically gentle.
I understand your position, Drayak.
Her voice exuded calm and resonated like soothing chords from a cello.
But the Council believes Tokor Laroki is right. He is our greatest mind. His advancements have eclipsed anything in the history of our people. We asked him to come up with a better solution. This is his plan.
Drayak suspected it would be one of the others who began the defense of what was happening here. He was surprised that Grazzi took the lead. He spat out his response a little too harshly.
And yet Laroki is not here.
Over his shoulder, the second ring began rotating in the opposite clockwise direction as it began to slowly disappear. But the indigo band was moving at a faster pace than the outside violet ring had traveled. Grazzi's face smoothed and softened as she smiled at her old friend.
Drayak, please. You know he is with one of the science teams at the beta site. He's monitoring the field regeneration.
Grazzi moved only her lips. Everything else remained perfectly motionless. Her serene bearing never wavered. Though still stoic, Drayak was more animated in his reaction.
Nonetheless, here we are, and I would remind you, my old friend, that Laroki no longer holds the position of Tokor. The censure he received from us over those blasted tiny machines and his ranting about immortality cost him his teaching position and title.
Then he spread his arms toward the throng of elder listeners, the white and tan of his council robe flowing out from his body like a sheet.
That was barely 100 years past. It seems everyone has forgotten. Laroki has swooned every member of this council with his amazing inventions. And now, this.
He pointed behind him with his large muscular arm.
He has manipulated this council as it has never been before.
Doret, who was the most vocal supporter and the original proponent of Laroki's plan, had been listening from the beginning of Drayak's speech. Now he stepped forward with the palms of both hands open to the front and his straight arms slightly spread apart to the side, as customary when openly contradicting another council elder. On the timer, the second ring finished and the blue third ring began unrolling around the circle, switching direction to counterclockwise again. But no one was watching the timer anymore. Instead, the entire group of elders were watching and slowly moving closer to the two senior council members. Doret bowed his head once to signify the interruption before he began.
But with respect, Elder Drayak, the council voted on this course of action. Laroki had nothing to do with it. The vote was only opposed by your ballot. We all decided. It is not the decision that I question, Elder Doret. It is the method by which we reach that decision. We are the Council of Elders. It is our duty to question the wisdom of this action. But we did not do that.
Doret looked at him with confusion as he returned his hands to inside the sleeves of his robe and dropped his arms by his sides.
We voted, Is that not the correct method by which to reach a decision? But we did not question the wisdom of this plan, Dorette. Don't you see? We let our fear dictate this decision. This event is so burned into our genetic memory that we are terrified of its arrival. As the day has gotten closer, we have allowed ourselves to be pushed into this course of action out of fear. After LaRocque's dramatic presentation, showing those vile computer-generated scenes of destruction the great event can cause, the council voted out of fear, not knowledge.
His voice was booming now.
It looked so real, our reaction was visceral. Anything that could possibly prevent those images from occurring would have been chosen at that point.
The blue ring on the timer finished unwinding, and the green middle ring began moving faster in the opposite direction. Just then, a deep, rumbling hum started coming from beneath the enormous chamber. Elder Grazi smiled.
See, Drayak, the star engine has begun, just as LaRocque said it would do. Everything is going to be fine.
In front of the display, Drayak didn't let up. He suddenly felt a sense of urgency. And that's where we'll stop. Okay. Well, I think that went well. How do you like this prologue? Kind of cool. It's starting to answer some questions, huh? Here, I'm going to stick this up here because Hunley told me this is part of his contract. I have to tell you to buy a t-shirt from my wife. If you want to help support the show, you can do that. Actually, she has some really cool stuff. Here's her store link if you want to see it. I have the red t-shirt. That's the one that has on it, which is cool. Tonight's show was brought to you by COVID-19 Trump. He's the bad Trump. Oh, who am I kidding? They're all bad Trumps. Anyway, all right, well, I'm gonna put on this and put on some music. This is my new it's kind of loud. We'll drop that down a little bit. This is my new rolling credits. Yeah, here we go. There we go. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow night.
When it's cold at night and you're all alone and your woman ain't been coming home, when your body and your mind need some ease and daddy, yeah, it's all right. Well, you know where I'll be sometime, baby. Everybody needs someone to talk